This week we've got an interesting question. I can't believe it, Summer. I see the hospitalization numbers, and I think we're on like, COVID 34 at this point. But it is still a part of our day to day. And so one of the things that is still top of mind is individuals who need time off because they may have contracted COVID-19. Now, for every person who is honest and has a test and says, "Hey, I'm down for a little bit. I need some time to recoup," there are times when people may be faking it. Matter of fact, I saw a thread on Twitter recently of people posting their COVID test and saying, "Hey, here's the one to use to prove that you got it, and then here's the one to prove that you are now COVID free." So there's a culture brewing around negative or false COVID test information. So we got this question in about what would you do if you suspected an employee was faking COVID to get time off. And Summer, I think you have a unique perspective on that question. Um, Whereas I'm just I'm seeing it out in the social spaces. You're seeing this question in the day to day. So what are your thoughts on this?
Well, it's concerning to me that we're still talking about COVID years later, and I'm sure everybody is exhausted over this topic, but it is still playing out in the workplaces. And so I thought this was a great topic to discuss because earlier on, I was not getting these same questions. If an employee said they had COVID, employers were like, okay, no problem, we'll do whatever you need, take your time. But I feel like as time has gone on, I'm starting to see individuals that maybe have had multiple absences. Maybe there's performance concerns, and there's kind of other things that are now raising the flag from the employer side where they're like, okay, like maybe, but really, to where they're starting to question it. And so when I'm speaking with people leaders and they're like, I'm not sure if they're faking it or not, I ask them, well, do you do you have these same suspicions if the team member said that they were sick for any other reasons, right? Because I feel like we should be putting this really in the same category of not just faking COVID, but faking really anything else in order to get time off. But where I think COVID specifically can be a little bit different in terms of, shall we say, severity of perhaps faking it is because some states actually provide paid benefits, right? So it's kind of a different level of dishonesty, shall we say.
I was looking into that now because the federal provisions expired in 2020 2021, but some states have continued, such as New York being one, where in some cases employees have that time. But it's not everywhere, and so I think that's even checklist to do. Item number one is know your state's policy around COVID leave, if it's paid, if you have to track it using a specific leave category, and if there's some sort of reimbursement program that they have, which would have followed the federal trend, where you could get some sort of reimbursement for that time off. Um, yeah,
I would say that some companies require even like proof of a doctor's note or test, while others don't. And while I think that it's completely fine to have different company policies, there's definitely some advantages and disadvantages that I wanted to discuss. The advantage is that, if you are requiring documentation, I think you're less likely to have individuals that will provide fake results. But then, of course, the downside is then, you're going to require team members to potentially go to a doctor or have to go out and get a test when, they maybe shouldn't be out in public if they're truly sick, and they're making it more difficult for them to take the time off that they truly need. Not to mention now having a doctor's note or medical records that you then have to ensure that you're protecting. So just a lot of considerations. Do you have any other thoughts on that specifically, Joey?
I am not a fan of the doctor's note in this situation. Similarly, because if a person is sick and they're waiting around in a doctor's office, they could get sick to a greater extent, and they could con- contaminate other folks who might be in close proximity, especially considering, there aren't mask mandates to the same degree as there were before. And a lot of our life is getting back to normal. I don't think folks are washing their hands as much or hand sanitizer as much. So, and with the cases being so high, the reported cases being so high, so in this case, I would err on the side of trust but verify, and maybe ask for the test. And I'll tell you, so for one company, I had to do a video shoot, and I had to hold the test up to like a website that shows the time, date, and kind of like like the time and date, so that I could prove that it was really me. Um, Maybe something like that, but anything beyond that, I think would be potentially dangerous for the employee and would be an unnecessary burden.
I think most companies that are requiring documentation of positive test results are pretty lenient in what they're willing to accept. And there's one story that I wanted to share with you about a company that did collect test results. And when they had a team member who reported that they needed to take time off for COVID, did kind of raise a red flag, simply because this individual had several absences leading up to this. That was just kind of like, wow, like another request. Okay, and when they received the results, it also was a little concerning because they had never seen this type of test before, and in this area, they kind of find that there's a general assortment of the same tests being used and submitted, which then prompted further research into the validity of this name brand test. So it was determined through some careful sleuthing that this test that was submitted was not only a test that wasn't available in the US, but that was a picture of a test that's shall we say, available on the internet to
Wow.
anybody.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, I use this as kind of a lesson for other employers, that if they are going to request tests, to just ensure that they have a process that they're following to protect the information, but that if they have a team member that they do find out is faking their results in order to get time off, that's actually a terminatable offense. And some of the processes that could be put in place, like the one that you explained, Joey, is brilliant. I think one of the tips that companies can do to remove the possibility of what I described with that fake test is having an individual submit a photo ID along with their test. It's not foolproof, but it at least requires that they have a positive result test in their possession.
And this topic makes me think too about why companies would benefit from partnering with us, because yes, it's important to have the policy, but the strategy and tactics of navigating something like this isn't something that a typical manager sees every day. And I say it all the time, you can't trust your gut or Google when it comes to significant HR things. And so you want to have someone in your corner that can help coach you through how to make this happen, and do it the right way.
Absolutely. I think there's a lot of places along the way that, while good intentioned, can actually, create some legal issues if these items aren't navigated carefully. So I think, we aren't going to see COVID going away anytime soon. I suspect that we will, continue to navigate the various state leave requirements. But if you're a small business out there needing help navigating these or any other HR matters, we would love to chat with you.
Yes, we would. And you can reach out to us at jumpstart-hr.com. You had mentioned earlier, I think we've got a little bit more time so we can kind of unpack a little bit that COVID is just one incident where people might attempt to fudge their time. Um, I I think about this from many different angles. I think yes, you have the bad apples that will take advantage of an opportunity. But I also think there's something to be said about environments where people feel like they can only get time off if they're sick. And so not to turn this around and say like it in any way would be an employer's fault, but like what what sort of values or environment should an employer have so that you could expect honesty and integrity when it comes to paid time off or vacation or sick leave?
Well, I think, the saying that, you receive trust when you give trust is definitely true. I think that creating that culture of trust is the foundation, and that the vast majority of team members, in those environments where I think there's strong relationships that are built, individuals that trust each other, there are conversations that occur that when a team member needs time off, companies going to, in most cases, do what they can uh, within reason to provide them that time off because, I mean, that's the right thing to do. But then on the other hand, there are sometimes employees that either take advantage or perhaps they're no longer happy at the company for a variety of reasons and then no longer feel like that trust is there. And I think that that's where we start to see performance challenges that morph into other issues that can ultimately result in needing to part ways.